AIG apparently agreeing to repay the Fed credit line in a deal with the U.S. Treasury. As you know, we've seen a lot of these companies that got huge, massive bailouts during the crisis starting to unwind those positions, or I should say the government starting to unwind some of those positions. Also, let's see, AIG to repay in a cash amount owed under the FRBNY credit line. Forgive me, these are kind of some headlines. Also saying the liquidation preference equal to the amount drawn by AIG. But again, the big one here, AIG agreeing to repay that Fed credit line in a deal with the U.S. Treasury. So I'm going to kick it up to our markets team. We've got Julie, Adam, and Dom. So, guys, we're starting to see this. We had Citigroup this week. We're seeing lots of moves along these lines. The interesting part about this is the Fed, remember, the FRBNY, or the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, was one of the huge counterparties there and kind of going and injecting liquidity or lending them money so they wouldn't go and kind of go bankrupt. Remember also, we're going to toss some jargon here, but we'll explain it. Maiden Lanes 1 and 2 were two special purpose vehicles set up by the Federal Reserve of New York, of which they're the only sole member of an LLC, basically there to kind of buy up some of these mortgage bonds and some of these other debt obligations from people like AIG so that they could actually have a little bit of liquidity in the system. So this is a huge step, that red banner on the bottom, because it gets a lot of that credit line out of the way, another step closer. We still own a big position, don't we?
Yes, the U.S. government, that's you, me, everybody else. We still own 81% of AIG, but as Dom correctly points out, this is a huge step because it says they don't effectively need working capital anymore.
Right.
So
I wonder what it means for the other holders. I mean, what does this mean for Fair Home Capital, for Star International, for Vanguard Group, which are State Street Corp? These are the top holders other than the 80% stake that the U.S. holds.
It's a vote of confidence in their position because it's telling you that AIG is slowly but surely, and maybe very slowly, but nonetheless, getting its house in order, paying back that money, and they move on and become private one day.
And setting up for a share sale potentially next year.
Yes.
Is the stock still halted? Those of you who have computers among us?
It is still halted.
Yes, it is.
It was down, though, about 4% just prior to this news. So, but nonetheless, this is a positive development.
And again, to kind of recap for the sports fans out there, remember they sold off a huge chunk of the company. Their Asian unit, AIA, they IPO'd, got almost like $20-some billion from that. They also sold Alico to MetLife for about $15 billion in cash and stock. So this is just another step in that right direction for AIG.
Well, and from the government side, too, it seems like the government has been very aggressive, whether you're talking about General Motors and pushing for the IPO, whether it's unwinding its stakes in some of these
coming
other
up in
companies.
2 years.
That's right.
No, I know.
It's still 2 years away, and the government has, for whatever the motivation may be.
A little cynicism coming from Carol Massar.
I know how that happened.
I know, usually it's coming from this side. But, you know, it's interesting how aggressive the government has been with all of these different companies.
If you look how incredibly well AIG has outperformed the S&P, for example, which is up, I think, what, 12% over the past 12 months. AIG is up about 40%, and it was 45 before today's trade.
Well, it did underperform by quite a bit as well.
We don't want to see a 4-year
But I'm talking about the last 12 months.
Right.
Hey, I want to point out, too, there's another headline. AIG is saying the Treasury to have control until the stake falls below 33%. It goes back to your point that we still own a big chunk of AIG.
There's a long way to go.
It's a very long way to go. And remember, there is still an ongoing dialogue between those running AIG and those running the government.
Speaking of those running AIG, remember that Bob Ben-Moshe over at AIG still has, by some respects, a very serious illness there. Again, that's something to pay attention to there as well.